So this week I want to talk about Dream Games, which just happens to be my Gekihen game, which I think I'm saying that right, which is Galactic Federation. I figured this was the best way to start before I start tearing down everyone else's Dream Games. So this game was made for a competition, and I originally had planned on doing much more than what was released for the competition, but honestly, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. First, let's talk about what Galactic Federation actually is currently, and then we can discuss what I actually dreamed of. So, Galactic Federation is a top-down action-adventure game featuring 4 characters. Each character has their own abilities and weapons, and play totally different from each other. The goal of the game is to kill the enemies that are in front of you and make it to the boss and win. I'm unsure if most people even got to the boss fight. The game features 3 different types of enemies outside of the boss fight. There are doors that can be opened with keys, a sprint button, and abilities that take up energy. But most characters don't even have functioning abilities. Some enemies are generated from a nest, like in the game Gauntlet, while others you find just hanging around. From moment to moment, the goal is essentially to locate a key to unlock the next area, until you finally reach that boss fight. It really just consists of a lot of searching, a bit of shooting, and just locating keys. There's a map in the game as well, but it looks like crap and it runs even worse than it looks. The whole game chugs along as well, but that's sort of my fault for my rush code. The game was written in lieu of Player Plus, and honestly is not representative of the framework. The slowdown of the game all comes down to poorly optimized code. At the time, I had a full-time job in political consulting, and the competition was really just something I worked on in small stretches. So I essentially had to do things in the ugliest but quickest way possible. Once you beat the boss, the game ends, and there really isn't much else to it. So what was Galactic Federation supposed to be? I had originally envisioned on basically making a top-down version of Destiny combined with Mass Effect, with just a hint of Gauntlet and Medal of Honor Infiltrator on the GBA. I wanted to make an RPG where you could team up with up to 3 people locally, pick up quests, and travel to multiple planets and explore various dungeons. Each character would have their own unique abilities to complement the team, which I had planned on actually creating 6 characters, each with their own unique abilities. The game is currently missing the stereotypical gray alien who was supposed to have psychic powers, and a squid alien character that was essentially going to function like a tank, featuring a lot of explosives. A ton of the mechanics are missing from the game as well. The robot character was supposed to have the ability to analyze characters, enemies, and foliage, and sort of create a catalog. Different weapons were supposed to be equipable, and there was even supposed to be an armor system, along with the skill tree and a ton of abilities for each character that could be unlocked as you leveled up. I also wanted dialogue trees, persuasion, hacking, and all the other typical RPG stuff. When you played solo, up to 3 members of your team were supposed to join you and follow you around, sort of like a Knights of the Old Republic. They would join in during fights, and you were supposed to be able to command them to use their abilities, such as healing, lockpicking, etc. I had also planned for drivable vehicles that would be accessible outside of dungeons. Some of these vehicles would have had weapons as well, because combat would take place in and outside of the dungeon. I even wanted ship combat, but that's a whole other thing. Certain vehicles would have allowed for multiple players to ride in them at the same time. Think of the Warthog in Halo. The combat system also wasn't exactly what I wanted either. I really wanted to add a cover system, and make items where you could take cover to be destructible. The current perspective of the game was also wrong, as it wouldn't really allow for a very readable cover system. I mean, honestly, the real dream was to have 3D models and backgrounds and sort of a top view game like those top-down Zelda games, but tilted in a way so you could see in front and behind of objects. But I lack 3D modeling skills. So some of you may be asking, why did I decide to create hand cannon instead of making this action RPG? Well, first, the way Galactic Federation looked is actually a far cry from what I originally envisioned. I knew the game that I wanted to make, and I just knew that I wasn't capable of producing the art for the project. I honestly still couldn't, and would need to have an artist or learn some new skills. Then I had to be honest with myself. I would have had to have added online multiplayer to make the game actually worth playing, because most people just wouldn't want to play local co-op, whether it's ad hoc on the Vita or multiple people playing on the same console or PC. Having a game, even one that could be played solo, but technically requires a community for the full experience, is terrifying to me, because once the community dies, the game basically dies. Plus, I would have to be rather arrogant to believe that I could make such a big multiplayer RPG on my own, while many major studios have such trouble with the same type of game. I mean, look at Anthem. Even if I had limited the game to only one planet, made fewer dungeons and a smaller skill trees, with a smaller set of abilities, I doubt that it would have actually been good. There are just so many moving parts to the game, in creating a seamless online experience where your friends could join you on the fly, just like in Destiny, most likely isn't very doable for me. So what does this actually mean for dream games? And your dream game? So your dream game, most likely, is too big for you to create on your own. Some of us have much smaller scope dream games, and in those cases, by all means, create your games. But if your dream game is in the realm of a AA or a AAA game, it's probably better to think smaller and scope downward. Knowing what I know now, I think the best thing I could have done was make a Gauntlet clone. Something with a nice 4-hour campaign, and then an endless mode with randomly generated dungeons, would have been the experience that I could have created. I could have even kept my idea of the 6 classes, added some of those cover shooting elements that I wanted, and kept some abilities. But in the end, that isn't the game that I want to make. Despite it actually being closer to my final vision than what I actually created, I wouldn't have wanted to make that game. I know what I want, and somewhere deep inside, I still hold out hope to make that game. I guess I'm just really hard-headed that way. Even hand cannon, in its current iteration, isn't what I had envisioned, but we'll get to that in a future video. So where does this leave you in your dream game? Well, first, unless you actually have made a game before, usually your dream game idea isn't going to appeal to most people. Sure, you may love the idea of the strategy game where you command an army of cyborg unicorns, but most people won't. Then even if your idea is the greatest idea since sliced bread, unless it's within your scope, you will either work for the rest of your life to try to make this game, or eventually abandon it, like so many of us. Personally, I think a dream game are best as dreams. It's the sort of ideal of the perfect game in our own heads. Grand ideas that you haven't yet to implement, interactive systems without bugs since they haven't been coded, and an art style so beautiful that an artist would have to live inside of your mind to actually replicate it. Once you start to actually build your dream game, the fantasy starts to fall apart rather quickly. You start to realize the way systems interacted in your vision is complicated, and every time you add a new element, something else is breaking. You figure out that your storyline, that sounded really cool in your head, doesn't actually make much sense when put down on paper. Then you try to draw your cool original character, and he just doesn't look quite as cool as he did in your mind. What happens next? Well, your dream is sort of crushed, and you get discouraged. Then this is also where a lot of people just sort of give up game development altogether. So what should you do instead? I know this is the advice that everyone hates to hear, but make smaller games. But not just any smaller games, but the smaller games that you're actually interested in making. If you're not like me, feel free to take elements from your dream game and try to create a micro version of your vision. If you are like me, well, just create something that you like. Hand cannon technically does take place within the Galactic Federation universe. A bunch of the alien species that will appear in hand cannon would have made an appearance in the final Galactic Federation game. So in a way, even I still found a way to bridge a connection between my dream and reality, despite making a game that's essentially totally different. But if you are insistent, go ahead and make your dream game. Make your GTA clone with RPG elements and the ability to walk into every building. I can't stop you either way. Just once you realize how complicated it all really is, and you're brought back to reality, don't let the experience sour your game dev journey. Instead, take what you've learned and apply it to something that's realistic to you and your situation and current abilities. So that's it for this week, everyone. Thank you for watching, and thanks for your time.